Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.
I'm Jesse Thorn. It's Bullseye. In his late 50s, Antonio Banderas took on one of his most challenging roles. His friend and frequent collaborator, director Pedro Almodóvar, had a new script, Pain and Glory. It's about a guy named Salvador Mallo. It's Banderas' character. He's a director. He made a handful of well-regarded sex comedies in the 80s. He has a nice apartment in Madrid, and he's stuck. He isn't really making movies anymore. He hardly has the drive to leave the house. He's beset by maladies, headaches, back pain, asthma. And all of those things are things that the character share with Almodóvar. Pain and Glory is Almodóvar's most personal confessional film. And in casting Banderas, someone who's known him for decades, he made the film all the more personal. Banderas' character wears Almodóvar's clothes, has the same spiky hairstyle, lives in a replica of his Madrid apartment. And Banderas' performance is beautiful. It isn't an impression. He doesn't channel Almodóvar. Instead, he personifies the director's pain, his need to create, nonetheless, even in his winter years. It's a beautiful film. If you have a chance to see Pain and Glory, I really recommend it. For now, though, let's get into my interview with Antonio Banderas. Antonio Banderas, welcome to Bullseye. It's so great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure.
And I also want to let you know, for our listeners at home as well, that you smell very nice.
Oh, thank you.
You smell great,
right.
Antonio.
That's good.
A few years ago, I had Almodóvar in here, and he doesn't like to do interviews in English. He's embarrassed of his English, but his English is very good. And he and I talked about migraine. He suffers from migraine, and I do too. And I felt like when I talked to him about it, he was very touched to talk about it. It's a hard thing to talk about, but he was very touched to talk about it. And I was very surprised, but in a way not surprised, that that kind of pain is such a big part of Pain and Glory.
Yeah.
You've known him for, 40 years or something. Did you know about that part of his life?
Yes. It was not that important when we met 4 decades ago, maybe because we were younger. He at that time probably he didn't suffer this migraine attack so strongly. But then when I came to America, actually, in the beginning of the 90s, I remember, because we never lost contact, but sometimes I call some of my friends, common friends, with Almodóvar, and I asked them about Pedro. Did you see Pedro? He said, no, Pedro is not going out lately. And apparently he got these migraines and he stays home. Also, he got problems in his back. He suffers from the photophobia. The light produced these headaches on him too. So no, he's getting very isolated. And then I every time that I went to Spain, and especially if I went to Madrid, I used to call him and just go for dinner with him and stuff like that. And then I started just realizing that he was very secluded, because I called him and I said, I can't do it. I don't feel good. See, he was always, giving what I thought at the time they were excuses, until I, realized that they were not excuses, that he was really suffering, It's interesting that you said that he actually was very interested and talking to you about that, because I think actually you can connect with people through pain too, and especially if it's a common pain. It happens to me too. I don't suffer those types of pain, though I got problems in my back in the past. But I suffered a heart attack now 2.5 years ago. And every time that I find somebody who had the same cardiac problem, I feel strangely and in a bizarre way connected to that person. Yeah. So I understand, that you establish some kind of connection, with your pain.
I mean, one of the unusual things about chronic pain, particularly, is that, it's invisible.
Yeah.
And you learn the lesson very quickly that you're not going, and you kind of learn it the hard way, that you don't get that far talking about it. Because other people can't see it, whether some people might not believe in it or not understand the stakes or whatever. You learn to just kind of lock it up.
Of course. And that's when actually the pain that is just physical can become something bigger than that. And it goes to the psyche, it goes to another places. As I was commenting before, and I saw that in Pedro, isolation basically, because, you have a friend or an enemy, better, that is invisible, that nobody sees. Everybody's happy. It's very difficult to connect with that kind of pain, but you see the effect that you produce in other people, so you start getting isolated, you start going away, and that produces another type of pain. So there is a moment in the movie, in Pain and Glory, in which he explains very graphically, almost like in a cartoon, all the different type of pains, and when there is that frontier, that border that you cross between the physical pain and the psychological pain. And the psychological pain, that's another animal, another, thing that you have to deal with, completely different and much more permanent, because that can even last longer. You can lose your physical pain, but that thing stays with you for a longer time.
What kind of relationship did you have with Almodóvar when the two of you were young?
Almodóvar is a very private person, and I always had a very strong relationship with him as friends, but limited. I never tried to trespass those sides of his privacy.
I mean, it's funny to think of him as a very private person. Not that I disbelieve you. It's just that, like in the 80s in Spain, when he first started making films, and right before he first started making films, like he was playing, and I watched clips of him playing in his band, which was like some of the wildest performance I've, like B-52's, Hold My Purse, like it was way past that.
Oh, yeah.
And, obviously his films are so grandly emotional and exciting and fun and kinetic and, all of those things. And you think this must be somebody who just like whirlwinds into your life and, and blasts it with color or something. It's what you're telling me is not what you might assume from his work.
Not in my case. I got to the Almodóvar universe as an actor. He saw me for the first time performing at the National Theatre. I was doing classic theatre at the time, and he just came to me to offer me a character in his second movie, Labyrinth of Passions.
How old were you?
I was at that time 19 years old. And so, we start working always like that. Then he got a group of crazy people breaking all the rules of the Spain of the time. You have to think that when I met Pedro was in 1980. That was 5 years after Franco died. So Spain was coming out of a dictatorship with a very specific rules, parameters, morality, a number of things that will accompany all this regime. Those things, they don't dissolve just like that by, a decree that says, now we are a democracy and everybody just forget 40 years of dictatorship and become something different. No, it doesn't happen like that. But people like Pedro Almodóvar, some musicians, groups, people in the world of photography, writers, they were pushing the idea of a new Spain, with more colorful, defined. So there were a bunch of people surrounding Almodóvar. They were like the Rolling Stones. It was like these guys are breaking the rules. Not all of them were actors. Some of them were writers, painters, but they act in Almodóvar movies almost like a hobby. It was kind of fun. It was kind of crazy and off the box completely. And I was almost the only actor, that actually was participating in that movement. But I wasn't part of that movement. So Almodóvar always called me in that context. It was not until 1985, 1986, I think by the time that we did Law of Desire, that, the relationship, I totally understood the dimension of the man that I had in front of me, because he was able actually to bend completely the Spanish morality of the time. The Law of Desire is a movie that actually put homosexuality on the screen very graphically, with no complexes at all, very raw, but at the same time very honestly. It was not a porn movie or anything like that. It was a real movie with a very interesting narrative that was, awarded all around Europe in the film festivals and stuff like that. But it was very interesting how that theme banned Spanish morality, and at the same time my own, in a way, because you start reflecting about the things that you have seen for many years. For example, yes, my character is homosexual and he kisses another man, and there is scenes that were very explicit in that context. But in the same movie, I killed somebody, and nobody put attention to that. That was accepted. That has been always accepted. The fact that a person can kill another person in a movie, is, even in movies for kids, is fine. If you don't see blood in movies for kids, it's totally fine. But one person kissing another person of the same sex, oh my God, it seems like the world is going to just explode and, in pieces. So things like that, Almodóvar, things that are that simple, were very important at the Spain of the time. Now, was I part of that movement? No, because I came out of the Almodóvar world and I did theater and I did other things. I belonged to the group, but to a certain limits. I was not full part of that kind of movement.
You grew up in Andalusia. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like when you were a kid?
Well, when I was a kid, until I was 15 years old, we were living under a dictatorship. That is, it was not very violent. And people may think that there was a lot of violence in that. What I remember is a state of, how can I describe it? Almost anesthesia. Everything was fine. Too fine. Eerie fine, And now, with time, if I think about those days, I can see the cracks of the regime at the time, how it was falling apart. But when Franco died, I remember growing up from being a kid into being a man at the same time that my country was going from a dictatorship to a democracy. So, those years. And the place where I was born, Malaga, which is in the south of Spain, the south of Andalusia, it was a little bit more liberal, more freer, if you will, because the tourists coming from the north of Europe, Swedish, Finland, Norwegian, British, they came with another things in their minds.
I was going to say, you get those wild Swedes in there.
Oh, yeah. He was not fun, actually. But they came with different stories and different things. And I remember discotheques in Torremolinos, called the Peeper, I remember, Tiffany's, places that were, you can find those places only probably in London at the time, in Europe, but they were in Torremolinos in Franco's times, which is an incredible anachronism, if you will, very weird. I remember going in the car with my father and my mother. We used to have a little apartment in Fuengirola, which is, like 30 kilometers from Malaga. You have to pass through Torremolinos, and Torremolinos was a heaven for hippies at the time, And I remember in 1970, 69, 71, something like that. My mother used to, in the car, we were crossing Torremolinos, and when she saw hippies, she ordered my brother and I to close our eyes. Close your eyes, there are hippies there. I love that. I am just crazy to do a movie in which I can just put that in. But yeah, it's true. I was, my family was a very good family. I never, had problems in my childhood. I love him father and mother and a great brother that is still, as today, my best friend. And so there is no traumas or anything related to my early years in the world. And then, as I said to you, politically, I understood, that the Franco regime had to disappear of our lives and start growing in a completely different direction. And that's exactly what the country did, yeah.
When did you leave town?
I left town on the 3rd of August, 1979. At 6 o'clock in the afternoon.
I just want to say I was not setting you up for that. I didn't know that you had the exact same time in there.
I had the exact time, and I had the exact image and the exact sounds and everything. My mother took my pants and she put secret pockets inside, just in case that I was robbed, that they couldn't find the money. The money that I left my hometown with was not even $100. That was all I had to my adventure. And they were in those secret pockets inside my pants. But I remember that afternoon, the train was called Costa del Sol. And I went there with my $100, a little suitcase, and some of my friends, actors, amateur actors that I worked with at the time, came to say goodbye. They brought me cigarettes and things like that at the time. And I remember exactly the moment that the train started going, because it was a movement without sound. It was like a clunk. And suddenly I saw my friends going away, and I knew at that moment that if I go back to Malaga, someday, I would be somebody else. I would be a new me. It was a very clear thought that came to my mind. This is it. This is a moment in which I separate from what I was until this particular time, and I'm going to create something new.
We'll have even more with Antonio Banderas in a minute. After a quick break, did you know that every single one of his lines in the Mambo Kings he learned phonetically? We'll talk more about that. It's Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR. Support for this podcast and the following message come from Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. In 1980, with a few $1,000s and used dairy equipment, Ken Grossman founded Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. Ken's award-winning ales propelled him from home brewer to craft brewer. Today, Ken and his family still own 100% of the company, one of the most successful independent craft breweries in America. More at sierranevada.com.
News breaks and big stories change every day. That's why we're giving you NPR's 10-minute morning news podcast on Saturdays, too. I'm Scott Simon.
And I'm Lulu Garcia-Navarro. Up first, start your day with us weekdays at 6 Eastern and Saturdays at 8, a bit later to suit your weekend, from NPR News.
Hello there, ghouls and gals. It is I, April Wolf. I'm here to take you through the twisty, scary, heart-pounding world of genre cinema on the exhilarating program known as Switchblade Sisters. The concept is simple. I invite a female filmmaker on each week, and we discuss their favorite genre film. Listen in closely to hear past guests like the Babadook director, Jennifer Kent, Winter's Bone director, Deborah Granick, and so many others every Thursday on MaximumFun.org. Tune in if you dare.
It's actually a very thought-provoking show that deeply explores the craft and philosophy behind the filmmaking process while also examining film through the lens of the female gaze. So, you should listen.
Switchblade Sisters.
Hey, everybody. So here's something unusual. If you've listened to Bullseye for a while, you might have heard of a comic named Chris Garcia. In 2016, we ran one of his sets as part of our Best Comedy of the Year special. He's got a brand new podcast called Scattered. So if you know Chris's comedy at all, you know that he does a lot of material about his father. But his father died a couple of years ago. And Chris realized that there was a lot that he himself didn't know about the man who raised him. His dad had a lot of secrets about his last years in Cuba, about his life in America, and he took those secrets to the grave. So now Chris is trying to dig up the truth and find out what happened. You can check it out. It's called Scattered from WNYC Studios. Best of luck to Chris Garcia. Funny guy, good guy, available wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back to Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. My guest, Antonio Banderas, stars in the new Pedro Almodóvar film, Pain and Glory. It's in theaters now. I have a lot of friends who are comics, and one of the skills that a comic has to develop is the ability to walk on stage, have an understanding of what the audience's impression of them is immediately, and address it so that they can do other things. You know, it's the cliche joke of somebody walking on stage if somebody says, I know what you're thinking, such and such had a baby with such and such. Well, here I am, right? And it's not, the comics don't do that because it's the funniest joke in the world. They do it just because they understand that as soon as they step in front of people, people have a reaction to what they see. And I wonder at what point, like, you realized that part of the reaction that people had to looking at you was that you are, and I'm just going to stipulate this, super handsome. You know, you're like some kind of movie star or something.
Right.
But I wonder, like, how you manage that in your life and when you realized, like, what effect it had on people, for good and ill, I'm sure.
One has always a tendency, and I talk about probably everybody, to actually don't be completely objective about what you are. Sometimes I get surprised, and I don't want to think too much about it, why the people sees in me. I see that I produce some kind of effect. But at the same time, that was kind of a handicap at some point. You say, oh, I am trapped in this thing. And it's one of the things, actually, when I've been doing Q&As these days, when you are sometimes answering questions that the people make to you, some of them are very poignant and very interesting. You start discovering things that you have done that you didn't even know, But one of the things that I had to do when I did Pain and Glory is to kill that guy, to kill Antonio Banderas. The Antonio Banderas that everybody has in his mind, that is kind of athletic. We have seen him in Zorro, we have seen him in action movies. So he's a guy that, performs, he moves good in front of the camera, whatever it is. I had to get rid of him somehow.
And you're not doing, it's interesting to me that while you are wearing Almodóvar's hairstyle and you're wearing his beautiful clothes, it didn't feel to me like you killed Antonio Banderas by doing an impression of Pedro Almodóvar.
No, that would have been a huge mistake. No, an impression is not acting. It's something else. And it goes more to the comedy territory, and it would have killed the movie. No, if we wanted to do something complex and deep, I had to, I can have the hair, I can have all the exterior thing, but the character has to be created from the inside out and cannot be an imitation. Because if it's an imitation, especially in Spain, that everybody knows Pedro Almodóvar and his mannerism, I would have been just imitating somebody. No, I have to create the character from another point of view, and so he got his own life. Remember, the character is not called Pedro Almodóvar, it's called Salvador Mallo. So I have to go with him. Then, of course, it's an alter ego of Pedro. And it has to do pretty much with the whole entire universe of the movie. Why? Because it's true that Almodóvar is not telling everything that is on the screen. Not everything happened for real. Some of the things happened, some of the things didn't happen. But that's the point. The point is to think, what am I? Am I only the things that I have done and the things that I have said? Or am I also the things that I have dreamt? Am I the things that I wanted to say and I never said? The things that I wanted to do and I never did? And Pedro Almodóvar allowed himself in this movie to do and to say those things. So in reality, it's him. Of course it's him, even if those events didn't happen. In reality, it's more Almodóvar than Pedro Almodóvar. Because it's just creating, the things that he never said to his mother, which was actually very emotional when we were doing that, because, you can have all type of information when you're doing a movie, especially if you're doing a character that actually existed. And it's very complicated when the character that you are playing is actually the director of the movie and is the one who's saying action and cut and is giving you indications. But when the indications that he's giving you are not verbal, but emotional, you see the effect that those lines produce in him, then it's, oh, man, I know exactly what is happening to him, so I can act it. I know what is inside. Sometimes he was giving indications to us, and he couldn't. He couldn't. It was so emotional to him that he had to go because he got tears in his eyes, So I said to him at those times, I said, just say action. I got it now, please. And he said, action, and boom, and he came. So, it's this movie was a different deal. But yes, no imitation. Though there was a rule. He allowed me, though. He came to me and he said to me, Antonio, if you want to use some of my mannerisms, I say no. No, Pedro, allow me just to go from another angle, really, because otherwise we are going to just do something that's going to be cheaper. And he agreed.
You've had a long career as an American movie star, very fruitfully, but I also think that you and Almodóvar as artists will be tied together for the rest of your lives and beyond. And it was a big deal for him to write and direct a movie that was this autobiographical, that was this much his story. That's not his normal modus operandi. Was it scary for you to accept that responsibility?
Yeah,
for this friend of yours that you must, I imagine, I've met the man once and I think all the time about how much I admire him. And you've had this working relationship for 40 years. I imagine that you also admire his art as much as I do and find him to be as compelling a person as I did.
Yeah, let's just, let me just tell you a story that explains why he's going to give you an answer. Our relationship as friends has been constant during all these 40 years. But as professionals, we stopped working at the end of the 80s, and we didn't go back to work until 22 years after. And that was for a movie called The Skin I Live In. So he called me after 22 years. I arrived because he loves to rehearse, right, for a month before principal photography, which is very rare in directors. Movie directors. Theater is normal, but not in movies. And so I arrived to my first rehearsals just throwing on the table and saying, Mira, look at the things that I have learned in America. Look at the way that I use my voice. I am so, secure now in front of the camera. I am so this and so that and so this and bim, pim, pom. And then after a week rehearsing, he said to me, those things that you brought from America, they may be very useful for your American directors, but they are not useful for me. So, where are you? And the question was like, what? Yeah, when are you? I am here. Really? So I got into the movie, confronting him in a little bit. And of course we are friends, and it's always a creative, relationship. But there was tension on the set. We were just, trying to just occupy our spaces. Then the movie finished, he edited the movie, and I went to the Toronto Film Festival. And I saw the movie for the first time there with an audience. And I just couldn't believe that he was capable to just take out of me, the character that I was seeing on the screen, that I didn't even know I had it inside. So it was like, oh my God. What happened? Well, what happened then is that you have to be humble. You have to be humble. You have to open your eyes, and you have to open your ears and your heart, and, realize that you were making a mistake, and you have to listen more, especially for those people that actually you have been growing with, And I was thinking, this is going to happen again or not? Is he going to call me again or not? So when I received this call, 9 years after, a professional call, Antonio, I send you a script. It's filled with references of people that you know, of yourself, of myself. You're going to find that material is very, very close to you too. I would like for you to play this guy, Salvador Mallo. He didn't say anything else. Of course, I read the script, and I thought, oh my God, this is it. This is the opportunity. So I called him and I said, all right, I'm going to just go there as a plain soldier. I don't have medals. I don't have anything. I had a heart attack, and I think I have learned from that too. And there is something that has changed in me, because when you see death face to face, things change in you. And he said, yeah, I noticed that, and I would like for you to use it for this character. Whatever happened in you, I don't know how to describe it, but it is something different. And I said, okay, so let's start from the scratch. I don't want to use those tools that made me feel comfortable in front of the camera, those tricks that I have learned during years that I know that are effective for an audience. I want to go from zero, man. Let's just try to get together in the mud and start creating the character from there. And he says, wow, it sounds beautiful to me. And that's how we start working in this movie, from zero. It's very scary because he sees everything. So in the moment that you're using tricks that he knows, no, Antonio, no, that's not the way to go. But a week after rehearsals, not even principal photography, we knew that we were rowing in the same direction. And it's so spectacular, how beautiful things were, that we finished the movie a week and a half before we were supposed to, which is unheard of in the movie world. Normally you go.
Right, you're constantly begging the money people for an extra few days of shooting.
Yeah. So it has been a very interesting experience that actually I don't think I totally metabolized yet. I need all of this foam that is surrounding us these days to go down, and probably in the years to come I will realize what happened, during all of those days of shooting, and how we found the things that we found, and how this movie is going to change our lives.
Yeah, I was thinking of Tom Cruise, one of our greatest movie stars.
Of course.
And the question is sometimes why is Tom Cruise one of our greatest movie stars? And he's a very good actor, but I don't think he's our greatest movie star because he's the greatest actor. But there's something about his almost his way of moving that is compelling.
Yeah.
Right? And I was thinking about this, and also the way that he looks is compelling. Like on screen, he's fascinating to look at, right?
He is,
whether
definitely.
or not you think he's the handsomest guy ever or not the handsomest guy ever, it's sort of irrelevant. You want to look at him, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking of these gifts that you have that are similar, in that you have a beautiful voice. People want to look at you on a screen, and you have a sort of, I think you alluded to it earlier, but like a physical, almost athletic quality that makes it so that you can be Zorro, right? Like not everybody can be Zorro,
right.
And make it seem right. And those are the things that you have to leave aside to do this particular role for the most important professional collaborator you've had in your career, where you're playing the highest stakes role that he has ever had in any film in his career because it's him. And, you have to let go of sounding beautiful. You have to allow yourself to, beat yourself up physically a little bit.
Be old.
Yeah, be old.
Decrepit, lonely. Yeah. But it happens too. I had kind of a training when I did for 7 months Picasso, because I don't look like Picasso neither. And I got into that scheme in a different way because, I know Picasso very well too because I was born in the same town that he was born in Malaga, in the south of Spain. So the image of Picasso has been always, inserted in my brain since I was a little kid. But also physically, I had completely a different, physicality. I don't want to be redundant, but and so I have to take a leap.
Yeah, it's like you can put it on a Picasso shirt. That helps, but it's not the...
That is not going to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
No. There is a way that he talk, there is a way that he walk, there is a way that, his presence, his aura, everything, about him. So in a way, age in a way is giving me more opportunities than my young years. And I am very thankful to that. To play characters that are way more interesting than the things that I used to do. And, I don't regret any of the things that I have done. But they were done at that time because I was very
Right.
close to them.
Yeah.
You know? Also, you have to think.
Antonio, I'll just say, if I could be Zorro in a movie, I'd take it. Yeah. I'd be into that. That'd be awesome.
All right, gotcha. No, another thing that for me was difficult is when I came to America. It's not that my English improved too much, but I couldn't speak the language at all when I came over here.
When you say that,
Yeah.
my understanding, and tell me if I'm wrong, was that you literally couldn't speak English when
At all. Nothing. Zero. Nothing. I learned my lines phonetically when I did the Mambo Kings.
Mike and I wanted to compliment you on your performance. That was a wonderful song.
Very nice.
Beautiful Maria of my soul.
I have written many different songs of many different versions of these songs. Excuse me.
Have you written any other songs?
Yes, a few songs.
A suitcase full.
Suitcase.
Suitcase.
So, where are you fellas from in Cuba?
Las
Las
Piñas.
Piñas.
That's the sugar mill town there in Oriente, you know that.
So am I from Oriente, too. Santiago.
I guess you put a couple of Cubanos together, we're all related, right? That goes for the celebration,
It was very weird. I had an interpreter just to give me the direction from the director. And, the director had to talk to the interpreter with me, and to the interpreter all day long, like that. I couldn't understand anybody. It was very weird and very bizarre experience.
Is it a different experience to you to act in English than in Spanish?
Yeah.
In what way?
It's weird, but your body moves in a different way. I work, for example, also in Italian language that I can speak Italian too, and my body moves in a different way. My hands goes crazy when I work in Italian. But it's something interesting. Even, in English obviously is not my mother language, but now it's different. But at the beginning, when I started working in English, words didn't have the history that the Spanish words had to me. And so it was very interesting to see that I was more detached emotionally from those words, and it was in a way easier to express things. I mean, English is a very synthetic language. You express with very little words. You express a lot of things and ideas, which is great. It's great for music, for example. But for example, it was very easy for me to say I love you in English, which it was not that easy to say te quiero or te amo in Español, because in Spanish I knew the weight of the words. Anybody would understand what I am saying. When you learn bad words in a different language, you just drop them. You don't care. You don't know really, because you don't have a history with the words. You are in a dinner and you say whatever word, and produce an effect on people that is, shocking to you, because for you that word is just a word,
Right.
Well, but the thing happened with everything, that you're saying. So there was a certain freedom, actually, that I felt when I was working in English, regardless of the accent. Yeah.
A big part of this film is not just the pain of, not just the physical, but the emotional pain of getting older. I think the pain that your character goes through is, it's partly the depression that comes from chronic pain that, I recognize, but also I think it is, when you're younger, it can be easier to build up the steam to take that on and take solace in the creativity that your character ultimately take solace in.
Yeah, getting old. What is getting old, really? Because if you have your memory and you have your intelligence with you, it's not that bad. The problem of the character, and I think the problem for anybody who become old, is when you have to stop doing what you love to do, and that is the big drama of the character. He wants to direct movies, but movies for him are a very physical, thing to do, and so he couldn't. He can't. So there is a moment in the movie in which he takes a decision. He's going to take a surgery. He goes for it. He want to fix himself. And there is something very simple in the movie, but very beautiful. The doctor comes to him. He's just received the anesthesia, didn't do effect yet, but he says to him, so what are you doing now? He said, well, no, he says to the doctor, I am writing. And he says that like, please, don't kill me. I have to continue doing things. So I am writing. So, oh, fantastic. What are you doing? A comedy, a tragedy? He says, oh, no, it's not comedy. It's not tragedy. Tragedy is both. It's just life. Boom. And he just loses consciousness. Well, there is the movie at the end is very hopeful. And I could see actually my character, Pedro, taking weight out of his shoulders as the movie was advancing. Why? Because there was a process of relieving. It was almost like a therapy for him. Because this movie at the end, even if it's a very specific story and the narrative is very specific, it managed with international and eternal concepts. The movie talks about reconciliation, about coming to terms with the past. It talks about even forgiveness and how you do that with your family, how you do that with actors in his case, how you do that with your lovers, how you do that with cinema itself and with life itself. And that is what I think hooked people into the movie. That is probably the secret and the mystery that makes this movie accessible by anybody.
One of the most moving scenes in the film is a scene where your character is in flashback. A lot of the film is in kind of reveries. And your character is an adult with his mom, who's very old, getting close to death. And your character is obviously like experiencing a lot of pain about his mom and the way his mom relates to the world and to him.
Yeah.
And there's a very sincere moment where your character apologizes to his mom for never being the kid that she wanted to have.
Yeah.
Which my initial instinct in that scene is like, well, this has to be an angry sentiment. This, like I'm used to that story being told on film, but I'm used to it being told from the perspective of a kid who's establishing their autonomy, even if that kid's an adult, right? But actually what it felt to me like was a sincere apology because he loves his mother, and not that he thinks he wants to have something else for his life or to have had. In fact, in that scene, he says, I'm just a different person and I was doing my life. Yeah. It's very beautiful, and, it's a beautiful moment of reconciliation, as you described.
That is one of those moments that I tried to explain before. All the information that came to me was emotional. Pedro Almodóvar loved to come to the set and read the scene with the actors, and he plays every actor and remind him while he's reading, little details here and there that we were just working on the rehearsals, and don't forget that, don't remember that you had to pick up things here, anything. So he read my mother. I was giving the replica to him, and when he was going to read my part, he took the script and he couldn't. He was going to read, and I saw that he couldn't read it. And suddenly I just stood up and I embraced him. And Julieta Serrano, the actress who played my mom, who was a dear friend of ours from a long time ago also. And I said to him that, go, just say action, man. I know what is happening. I know that what you wrote is what you wanted to say that you never said. And so I'm gonna hit it. And exactly what you said, there was no angriness. There was a real apology. That doesn't mean that he says at that time, I'm going to change, Mama, I'm going to be something different, because he couldn't. This is where I am. I had to accept myself as I am, as I feel. And I am sorry for that, because I know probably that you wanted something different. And I am so sorry for that too. So it's very simple and very beautiful, to that apology in which there is no angriness involved. Yeah.
Well, Antonio, I'm so grateful to you for coming to be on Bullseye and for this absolutely beautiful film.
Thank you.
It was a a very moving performance, an extraordinary performance.
Thank you so much.
Antonio Banderas, Pain and Glory is his latest film. It is beautiful and touching. You can see it now in select theaters. I recommend that you do. It's really something else, and Banderas is amazing in it. That's the end of another episode of Bullseye. Bullseye is produced at MaximumFun.org, world headquarters overlooking MacArthur Park in beautiful Los Angeles, California. If you're wondering, there's a woman who makes quesadillas at 7th and Alvarado. Highly recommended by our staff. I got to get over there. I had a quesadilla for lunch, but I had a quesadilla al pastor from taco truck a few blocks away. Maybe I should have gone to the quesadilla lady. Show is produced by Speaking Into Microphones. I'm going to be honest. I saw a picture of Kevin's quesadilla, my producer Kevin's quesadilla. He ate yesterday. It looked good. Maybe some pickled red onions in there, looked like. Anyway, our producer, Kevin Ferguson, aforementioned. Jesus Ambrosio is our associate producer. We get help from Casey O'Brien. Our production fellows are Jordan Cowling and Melissa Duenas. Our interstitial music is by Dan Wally, who's also known as DJ W. Our theme song is by the Go Team, the great band from England. Thanks to them and their label Memphis Industries for letting us use it. And we have a huge archive of Bullseye interviews. We are coming up on 20 years of this show existing. One of my all-time favorites was with Pedro Almodóvar a couple years back when his last film came out. Google that. Search for it with whatever your DuckDuckGo it. I think you'll be happy you did. Pedro Almodóvar on Bullseye, one of my favorites of all time. What an amazing man. We talked a lot about chronic pain, actually. We talked about migraine, from which both he and I suffer. He's an amazing guy as well as an amazing filmmaker. And I guess that's about it. Just remember, all great radio hosts have a signature sign-off.
Bullseye with Jesse Thorn is a production of MaximumFun.org and is distributed by NPR.